Hey, my name's Paul. In this video, I'm going to teach you how to use different APIs and read API documentation to then use these different services inside of Make.com. This is one of the most necessary skills if you're getting into AI or automation. Let's get right into it. Okay, so I'm going to be guiding you through how to do this using Make.com, but the process is literally the exact same thing with N8N and pretty much every other automation tool out there. But let's go ahead and sign in with Google, log into my Make real quick. I'll select my organization. And then I'm going to go ahead and create a new scenario. And then I'm going to say API guide. Whoops, spelled it wrong. Put a 3 in there. Okay, so now that we have our little playground here, first thing we're going to do is actually not use a custom HTTP request essentially, but I'm going to show you kind of how the Make.com modules work anyways. So if I was to select this module, search for a person's email, by the way, this service essentially finds leads emails. I use it all the time for myself and prospects. Basically, you get to plug in, a first name or a company name, and then just look for that person's email. To do that, you'll just want to come over to API and then, copy your API key, and then click on add, give it a name, paste it in there. It's very easy. But in this example, I'll just search, let me see, maybe a different module. We'll do validating email. So I'm gonna just paste in my email for this example, and essentially this is gonna verify the email. But let's go ahead and run this once. Just to make sure it's working. So we have success is true, validation is valid, and in the input here we have email. Well, what's interesting about this is basically a pre-configured HTTP make a request module. So this is the same thing as, I'm gonna show you how to do this, as putting in, the same headers, endpoint, API key, query, whatever they use for this, and sending it to the server and then receiving it back, except it's all pre-configured in Make. But there's a lot of services, especially newer ones, that don't have the built-in modules inside of Make, so you really need to know how to use this. But basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to teach you how to do this. So all of these services that have an API key are going to have some sort of API documentation and the different endpoints. And they're also going to show you, how to get your API key, etc. So I've just shown you how to do it with this service. They have their API documentation here. Usually you can just go to Google, search for this service and then, API documentation. It's pretty simple. Introduction, email finder API. But we're already here, so you can see we have these different, well, first off, we have our introduction, which basically shows us how we use our authentication. So there's a couple of different ways you can do your authentication with API keys. Sometimes it'll be, you'll have a header here that says authorization, okay, and then you'll have the word bearer followed by your API key. And this basically it's almost like a password for us. It basically lets us access the API endpoints. So let's see. So for authentication, we have all of this. Add a header named authorization to your requests. Okay, so basically what I just showed you. But let's see. Other, verify email. We have this endpoint. So endpoints are basically the URL that we're sending the data to. So in this example, it's https api.nameemailfinder/v5/validate.json. That's exactly what this module right here just did, is it posted to that endpoint. Since we already have our account connected, it actually pre-filled that header. And then this, the email to validate, is the same thing as this JSON body that we're sending over. So post body parameters, we have email, and then we have headers. Okay, so I'm going to show you how to set this up when there is JSON involved, because it's really simple. But let's go ahead and check out our headers. We have authorization, bearer, your API key. So let's come back to our API key, copy this. We have authorization, bearer, paste this in. The URL is going to be the endpoint, and if you're curious about this method, I'm going to show you that as well. And copy this endpoint. We'll paste it in here, just like that. And then the method is essentially, how we're sending the data. The only two that you're really going to use with these services is get and post, because post usually means, or it always means, you're basically sending data to the server. This can start something, this can perform an action, etc. get is essentially getting back data that's already there. It's already been configured. So in this example, we're validating an email. Well, I don't know if they have my email or not, but they're not just storing it. So we're not going to say get vipxdeal@gmail.com. We're saying, hey, go verify vipxdeal@gmail.com. So now that we have that endpoint, we also have this -x. Now, a lot of the time in these code examples, they're not going to have this make.com Zapier stuff going on. But they will have, Node.js, Python, PHP. Curl is just the easiest one to read for this type of stuff, because if I change it to Python, you still have the same thing, but you have all this different stuff, the bad requests, status code, all the good stuff. If you want to, you can use it. I just think curl is the easiest method to use, because you have this -h headers, and then you have this -d, which is the JSON, and then you have the -x, which is the method, followed by the endpoint. So it's just all there. It's really, compressed. It's very easy to read. So we also have this JSON string, which basically sends over a variable with our email. So I'm going to change the body type to raw, content type to application JSON, and then we have the following JSON. So let's see if we have everything set up. We need to change our method to post, because that's also in here, -post. We also have our headers. So this is something, it's optional. As you can see here, string is optional. Basically what this does, this is kind of unique to the specific service, but this is actually a good example to show you guys. I'm gonna create a new scenario, because this, if you've worked with triggers before in make.com, you'll know that, like, for example, watch actor runs, you can see it has this instant one. Essentially, the instant modules are webhooks that can receive data as soon as something happens. Acid is essentially a get request that just polls every few minutes. So it goes get, is it there? Get, is it there? And then you can have a filter set up. Is it there? If so, continue the flow. So I'm going to go ahead and set up a webhook, custom webhook. I'll name this AMF validate email. And then I'll copy this webhook. So essentially, if you come back here, specify a URL to receive a webhook callback when the result is ready, instead of waiting for the request to complete. So if you had a bunch of emails you were verifying maybe all at once, maybe you sent over an array of them, you wouldn't want to just sleep there. Like, say if you sent over 1,000 emails or something, you don't want to, as you can see, no rate limit, so you technically could do that. You don't want to just sleep for like an hour, because one, you can't in Make, and it's just inefficient. So you just want to get it back as soon as it's done. It's the same thing with a lot of those Appify actors. We basically have a callback URL so that when the action is performed successfully, so whenever the email is validated and it's like, hey, it's ready, we validated, either it's invalid, it's valid, maybe it's a catch-all, then we send it back to this webhook, and then we can continue. So I'm going to copy this, and you see how to set it up. They say it's a header. So what we're going to do is add another header. The name is X webhook URL, so I'll copy that, paste it in here, and then example value, which is just what we put in here, I'm going to copy this, and then we'll just have this running. I'm going to paste it in here. So as soon as it's done, it's going to post the result of it back to that webhook. So for this, I'm going to change this to my email, vipxdeal@gmail.com. And I believe this is all set up. So we have our endpoint, we have our method, we have the different headers we need, including our authorization. We have a webhook URL or a callback URL to send data back to as soon as it's done. We have our JSON body, which is essentially the request we're sending over. So we should be good to go. So if I go ahead and click on run once, it's done. And in this second scenario, we have integration webhooks, or sorry, I just read out the name for some reason. We have our webhook, which has received the success is true, validation is valid, and it was obviously very quickly. We have our input, which is essentially this JSON body we put in. Let's see, request ID. But since we put in that webhook URL, it doesn't actually return anything, which is fine. That's kind of what we want. But this is essentially the same exact module. These two are basically the same thing now. And the reason you need to know this is because a lot of the time these services don't have a built-in module, or there's some endpoints that don't have a built-in module, and you still need to access them. So I'm going to rename this to AMF validate email. Okay, so that example's done. That's how you would use it there. Now the second example I'm going to guide you through is actually OpenAI. because, I just think it's good to know. Because, in the case of a new model dropping or something, it's really good to know, like Claude 3.7, they didn't have that immediately built in, so you needed to know how to use the API endpoint to access it. Same thing with the newer OpenAI web search, like in N8N. A lot of the time, the apps in N8N don't have the built-in modules yet, so it's just good to know. So I'm going to search for, again, you just type in the platform you're searching for, OpenAI API documentation, API reference, let's go to here. And it's going to be a similar process. We're going to have headers, we're going to have request content, we're going to have methods and endpoints. So let's give it a second to load. I'm gonna actually go ahead and close this out. Okay, so we're brought here to the introduction. We have an authentication header in our authentication section. So we have authorization, bearer, OpenAI key. So it's basically the same thing here. API key should be provided via the HTTP bearer authentication, which is basically that, bearer followed by your API key. Same exact thing as we did before. So to actually get your API key for this, I'm sure they have it somewhere here, but we can just go ahead and go to this URL, platform.openai.com/doc/overview. So I'm going to go ahead and log in. Now that I'm logged in, the thing that we want to do is find our API key. So to get it in OpenAI, we just go to settings, API keys, and then I'm going to go ahead and create a new secret key. I'm going to say API masterclass. And then I'm just going to select default project as my project, create the secret key, copy this, and we'll go ahead and start setting up our HTTP make a request module. I spent too much time inside of N8N. So we're going to go to HTTP, make a request. I'm going to unlink these, and this will be our trigger. We'll just move this out of the way. And since we know we need this authorization header, we can go ahead and type in authorization. And a lot of services use this exact same API type thing. So sometimes it'll be in the URL, sometimes it'll be a query string, but a lot of the time it's going to be this header method. So I'm going to go ahead and type in bearer and then paste in this API key. And then we're going to come back to the reference and we're going to scroll down to, is it modules? I want to create a chat completion actually. So let's go to chat completions here. So you can see in the documentation, we have a method here and then we have a post. Again, we can use curl as the method. And example request is this GPT-4o request. So we have these different headers in here. We have request body, model, audio, function call. Some of these are depreciated, logic bias, logic, probs, metadata, a lot of this different stuff. But for this example, what I'm going to do is copy this endpoint. The method was post, as you can see. I'm going to go ahead and change this to post. We already have our authorization header. And then we're just going to under here. So this tag D is just where the JSON starts. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this without the quotes. And then I'm going to change the body type to raw, content type to application JSON. And then I'm going to press Control-Shift-V. I believe it's Command-Shift-V on Mac, just to paste with formatting. And you can see we have these different headers. Now, just to show you real quick, this is the same thing as doing a create a completion using a GPT-4o module. Okay. So let's let this load real quick. And then essentially giving it a user prompt. So if I was to say hi, let's see. So we have a role developer, we have content, you are a helpful assistant, and then we have a role for the user as well. So I'm going to go ahead and backspace this. And we just have this messages array, which just lets us send over, we can send over system messages, assistant messages, user messages. It's all the same thing. So if we want to message GPT-4o with hello, I believe we could do that. It's already pre-configured. So let's see if we need anything else. We do need a header that says content-type. Actually, this is pre-filled in here, so it's good to go if you change this content type here. But again, some automation tools aren't going to have that. So if they don't, you just want to type in content type followed by application/JSON, and you can leave it in there. It doesn't matter. So let's go ahead and test this out. Run once. Okay, let's go to data. And then we actually get back this content. Now, if you don't know in make.com, sometimes it's going to return this as just raw JSON. So what we can do is you can either do this in the settings down here. We want to parse this JSON so that it comes back as variables so we can access them. That way we don't have to, if we were messaging, a model via the API like this and it returned JSON and then we wanted to feed that in somewhere, we don't want that big long string of JSON. We just want the message that it gives back to us. So I'm going to select parse response, click on save, and then I'll try running this again. Let's go to data. If we go under choices array, message, we have hi there, how can I assist you today? So we can successfully message the model via the API. So hopefully you're kind of getting the hang of this. We have headers, we have, we have our actual request content, and then we have endpoints, methods, etc. Sometimes we're gonna have query strings. But since we've been using post so much, I think our last example is gonna be with instantly, just so I can show you. There's a lot of different services, but we've been using the post method. But I'm gonna just show you how the get method works as well. So I'm gonna rename this to GPT-4o message. Okay. And I believe this endpoint actually isn't in instantly. So this is a real example of why you need to know this. So I'm going to search for instantly AI API. We're going to go to this first link here. We have introduction. We have all this good stuff. But I believe what we're going to want to do is maybe, what endpoint do we want to use? Maybe, I don't want to hit my API key. Maybe a workspace. Yeah, so we'll use this endpoint. So we have parameters, we have get, and then we have patch. Now that's a rare example where you could actually use the patch. But essentially, we want to go up to the top here. Workspace, schema. Okay, so we have all of this good stuff. We have an endpoint, and then we also... yeah, this is the response that we're expecting if it's successful. So we have, our code request. So we have get / this URL and then an authorization header. So let's do this a little bit, faster. We're starting to get the hang of it. Let's get an HTTP make a request module. The method is going to be get. We're going to copy this endpoint here. I will remove the space. And then we're going to add a header, authorization. Okay. And then, let's see here, I got so many tabs open. Authorization bearer. And then to get our API key, we'll just go to instantly. It's pretty similar with all services. It'll just be like in your account. Let's let this load. I'm gonna have to verify that I'm a human. Log in. I'm gonna go ahead and log in. And then I'm gonna go down here to settings, integrations, API keys. I'm gonna create an API key. I'm gonna call this API key. And then for scopes, I'm just gonna select all. If you don't know what these are, basically it's what access an API key can do. So if you only selected API keys delete, then it can only delete API keys. That's the only thing it can do. So I'm gonna go ahead and click on create, copy this API key, paste it in here. And this is a really good example for the reason that if I go to instantly and their modules, we do have a make an API call. Basically, this just eliminates the process of us having to fill in our bearer, and they kind of shorten the URL here. You don't have to put in your bearer because once you add the account, it just auto does it. And then the endpoint is just usually the app's name and then /API and then the specific endpoint to the server that you're using. Then you just paste in your body. But Instantly doesn't have a built-in module for getting the current workspace. So what we can do is just do it via here. So if I go and click on run once, let's go ahead and parse this response. We get back data, we have an ID, we have a timestamp created, we have the name, we have the plain ID, default opportunity value, we have a whole bunch of different info that we can then use. Thanks for watching to the end. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to drop me a like and subscribe. Besides that, everybody have a great day and peace out.